They say east to west, home is best. But where is home? Is it the place that embraced me, the place to raise me, or the place where I was born? So where is home? Where is home? My whole life I had to answer the question. Where are you from?
Hello and welcome to all of you to the living room at the Houston Public Library. Today we have the privilege to honor and celebrate our refugee community here in Houston and across the US, exploring the universal and unifying power of music for our refugee community. We have a group of amazing performances and inspiring leaders who will lead us in experiencing notes for change, music to heal, learn, and shine in honor of this year's United Nations theme for World Refugee Day. The Living Room program series is about neighbors meeting neighbors. Here in Houston, the most diverse city in the nation, we believe that learning from our neighbors is one of the most powerful ways to learn together. And today we have an amazing set of panelists, beginning with Kimberly Haynes, who is the Executive Director and Regional Replacement Designee for the South Texas Office for Refugees, which leads the Refugee Resettlement Program for Houston. We also have Jimmy Lopez-Bellido, who led the innovative program Resilient Sounds of Houston and was as the composer in residence at the Houston Symphony. We also have Sebastian Agignoae. He is the visionary and founder behind the International Orchestra of Refugees, which is committed to using music as a strong ambassador for peace and generating sustainable opportunities for refugees and migrants to prosper. And we also have Shawn Conley, who is a musician and composer with the SilkRoad Ensemble and is the recipient of the SilkRoad Ensemble's 2020 Seed Award for his project, the Refugee Songbook. So we have an incredible and full program today. And before we get started, we want to thank the Houston Public Library Foundation for their generous support of this program and all programs at the Houston Public Library. I also want to thank the Houston Public Library International Services Engagement and Outreach Coordinator, Ana Frade, for her vision and her passion that makes this program possible. Before we begin, we want to start with a video to learn about who are refugees. What is their journey before we come to meet them here? And so we'll start with a video by Ted Ed, and let's watch together.
Around the globe, there are approximately 60 million people who have been forced to leave their homes to escape war, violence, and persecution. The majority of them have become internally displaced persons, which means they have fled their homes but are still within their own countries. Others have crossed a border and sought shelter outside of their own countries. They are commonly referred to as refugees. But what exactly does that term mean? The world has known refugees for millennia, but the modern definition was drafted in the UN's 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees in response to mass persecutions and displacements of the Second World War. It defines a refugee as someone who is outside their country of nationality and is unable to return to their home country because of well-founded fears of being persecuted. That persecution may be due to their race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion, and is often related to war and violence. Today, roughly half the world's refugees are children, some of them unaccompanied by an adult, a situation that makes them especially vulnerable to child labor or sexual exploitation. Each refugee's story is different, and many must undergo dangerous journeys with uncertain outcomes. But before we get to what their journeys involve, let's clear one thing up. There's a lot of confusion regarding the difference between the terms migrant and refugee. Migrants usually refers to people who leave their country for reasons not related to persecution, such as searching for better economic opportunities or leaving drought-stricken areas in search of better circumstances. There are many people around the world who have been displaced because of natural disasters, food insecurities, and other hardships. But international law, rightly or wrongly, only recognizes those fleeing conflict and violence as refugees. So what happens when someone flees their country? Most refugee journeys are long and perilous, with limited access to shelter, water, or food. Since the departure can be sudden and unexpected, belongings might be left behind, and people who are evading conflict often do not have the required documents like visas to board airplanes and legally enter other countries. Financial and political factors can also prevent them from traveling by standard routes. This means they can usually only travel by land or sea and may need to entrust their lives to smugglers to help them cross borders. Whereas some people seek safety with their families, others attempt passage alone and leave their loved ones behind with the hopes of being reunited later. This separation can be traumatic and unbearably long. While more than half the world's refugees are in cities, sometimes the first stop for a person fleeing conflict is a refugee camp, usually run by the United Nations Refugee Agency or local governments. Refugee camps are intended to be temporary structures, offering short-term shelter until inhabitants can safely return home, be integrated to the host country, or resettle in another country. But resettlement and long-term integration options are often limited. So many refugees are left with no choice but to remain in camps for years and sometimes even decades. Once in a new country, the first legal step for a displaced person is to apply for asylum. At this point, they're an asylum seeker and not officially recognized as a refugee until the application has been accepted. While countries by and large agree on one definition of refugee, every host country is responsible for examining all requests for asylum and deciding whether applicants can be granted the status of refugee. Different countries' guidelines can vary substantially. Host countries have several duties towards people they have recognized as refugees, like the guarantee of a minimum standard of treatment and non-discrimination. The most basic obligation towards refugees is non-refoulement, a principle preventing a nation from sending an individual to a country where their life and freedom are threatened. In reality, however, refugees are frequently the victims of inconsistent and discriminatory treatment. They are increasingly obliged to rebuild their lives in the face of xenophobia and racism. And all too often, they aren't permitted to enter the workforce and are fully dependent on humanitarian aid. In addition, far too many refugee children are out of school due to lack of funding for education programs. If you go back in your own family history, chances are you will discover that at a certain point, your ancestors were forced from their homes, either escaping a war or fleeing discrimination and persecution. It would be good of us to remember their stories when we hear of refugees currently displaced, searching for a new home.
So that was a great overview of the refugee program. And we are now very honored to be joined by Kimberly Haynes, who again is the Executive Director of the South Texas Office of Refugees. She has led in this role since 2017 for Houston, which is the largest refugee resettlement program in the nation. Since that 2017, she has led through probably one of the most significant structural changes in the refugee program in nearly 4 decades. She comes with 28 years of nonprofit management experiences across the IRC, the International Catholic Migration Commission, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, as well as the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. Kim, we're so honored to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I certainly appreciate the opportunity.
So after viewing that video, we would love for you to share about the program, the Refugee Resettlement Program in Houston, how this amazing community of organizations has come together since the 1970s or 80s, and kind of where we are in Houston in welcoming, all people to our city.
No, certainly. Houston's an amazing, dynamic city, and it's one that I'm very lucky to be a part of. There are 5 very large resettlement agencies here in the greater Houston area who, as you noted, have been here since the early 1970s doing this work before the federal government ever got involved in sort of the refugee resettlement. So a commitment to, open arms and outreach and to welcoming the stranger through whether that be the biblical process or the beyond community sort of engagement process. And so it's been an amazing development over many years. They have grown into relating with the state in many different ways, as well as with many stakeholders across the entire city to sort of engage and weave a fabric of refugees being incorporated and included in all the various facets of what Greater Houston has to offer. These agencies have been welcoming refugees again since the 70s. They've brought forward or brought into Houston about 70,000 refugees over this time and have really worked to sustain and provide them opportunities in restarting their lives and rebuilding their dreams and, finding neighbors and recreating opportunities. And so it's been a long haul, and there's been many ups and downs over generations of change, but these 5 have been strong. Houston's been one of the strongest cities for refugee resettlement for at least the last 5 years, and they continue to reach more and more individuals and welcome more and more refugees into our community. Yeah.
And these refugees come from countries all over the world. It's not just one place, right?
Absolutely. So the diversity of our refugees are over 125 languages, and from 70 plus different countries around the world. And so any one year there could be a variety of individuals from different situations and circumstances around the world. And again, that they work in partnership with Department of State and oversees UNHCR to sort of identify these individuals who are in desperate need of resettlement. I mean, less than 1% of refugees around the world even have the opportunity for refugee resettlement. So this is a very, very tiny program in the scope of the humanitarian crisis around the world.
And can you share with us a little bit more about that scope? So how many people are applying to for entry into various countries around the world, and then what's the process that you have to welcome them?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, there's over, UNHCR indicates that there's over 80 million individuals that are displaced or trying to flee due to persecution and other various conditions. And, 1.4 million that they've identified as needing resettlement. However, the reality is less than, 0.001% of that 1.44 million ever get the opportunity. There's about only, I think the last total I have is about 10 countries in the whole world that accept refugees, United States being one of the largest, and had been up until recently one of the largest accepting refugees. So we took the largest number, but that number has always vacillated between somewhere around 80,000 to, again, 50,000, and in our more recent years, even lower. But the process by which is that many of these individuals have fled their country, crossed international borders, have been either in urban cities waiting to find opportunities for resettlement through UNHCR or through their embassy, or have been in refugee camps for, decades, sometimes 30 plus to 40 years before resettlement looks to be an opportunity for them. And in their process of applying, the average time it takes for refugees to come into any country but the United States is somewhere between 4 and 7 years. And that's a lot to do with the process of vetting and screening and background checks and all the various components to ensure their safety and well-being, as well as receiving country's safety and well-being, and to make sure that it is in the best interest of those individuals for resettlement. And when they come, again, it is that they are identified to go to certain cities across the country that may have cultural linguistic capacity or may have expertise. Houston is a great capital for medical. And so we do see a lot of cases that need specialized medical attention. And so, but the services that they come with are really, a lot of partnership with volunteers and community members to welcome them in a new house, in a new apartment, all the furnishing, food related to that, the showing up at the airport and picking them up, to the day-to-day sort of figuring out how life is. And then the long, arduous process of integration, and what that means for each person is very unique, but how do they navigate their new world is all part of the services that are encompassed in refugee resettlement.
Yeah, no, thanks for, and we being in Houston and, receiving such a wide diversity of people from so many backgrounds, I wonder if you could share a little bit about, the contribution of the refugee community to Houston, from your perspective personally.
Again, there is not enough to say how much refugees contribute to our communities and our society. I mean, there's the economics of it. Again, they are the largest entrepreneurs within the greater Houston area. So refugees, become entrepreneurs at a much faster rate than US born. So they're generating jobs, they're generating new businesses, they're generating income, they're generating taxes. But again, it's about the neighborhoods and the relationships, right? The diversity in my even small neighborhood is largely due to the fact that we have such a wide swath of immigrants and refugees here in the greater Houston area. And so it's not just the economic benefit, but the social, emotional, and family benefit that I think refugees bring. The cultural diversity allows for people to really experience and understand the diversity of what brings people together, and that's food and music and conversation and love for family. I mean, again, those are some of the core values I think of anybody, and especially these communities when they get together.
Completely agree, and thank you so much for sharing that overview. And again, today we are here to dive deep into the music of our refugee community and the amazing power of the universal language of music to express what we are thinking to one another across language. And we have just an amazing group of leaders across the United States who have done just such inspiring work with the refugee community. We want to start with Jimmy Lopez-Bellido. And just a little bit of background on him. He's a native of Lima, Peru, and studied in Lima's National Conservatory of Music prior to graduating from the Sibelius Academy in Helsinki with a master's degree in music. He completed his PhD in music at the University of California at Berkeley, and has created works performed by leading orchestras around the world in venues such as Carnegie Hall, the Sydney Opera House, Gewandhaus Leipzig, Kennedy Center, Concerthaus Berlin, the 2010 Youth Olympic Games in Singapore, and the Aspen and Tanglewood Music Festivals. One of his most famous works, called Fiesta, has received over 100 performances worldwide, making it one of the most performed contemporary orchestral works. Jimmy completed his 3-year tenure as composer in residence at the Houston Symphony in the spring of 2020, and he led the innovative new program, Resilient Sounds of Houston, which celebrated Houston's refugee communities through a collaboration with Interfaith Ministries and Rice University Shepherd School of Music. Jimmy, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure to be here with all of you. It was very illuminating to hear Kimberly and actually the introductory video, really to give us all a sense of what we're talking about here. We're talking about human lives and their contributions, really, in essence. And, when it pertains to music, of course, that is what I know, and that is a tool that I want to use to do good in this world. And when I was asked to create a program as my residency, as part of my residency, I asked the staff at the Houston Symphony what were Houstonians most proud of. And diversity was the one word that came up constantly. And I learned really, I got an education on Houston's welcoming to the refugee community from around the world. And I felt that this was material that was incredibly inspiring and that could launch, a program that in fact actually permeated all of my residency throughout the 3 years. So we started with obviously the idea of trying to mentor young composers. We created a partnership with University of Houston and Rice University. We selected three composers from each, from different stages of development. They were all very brilliant. They underwent a rigorous selection process. They were Alejandro Basulto, Kyle Rivera, Patrick Lenz, Erin Graham, Victor Rangel, and Erberg Ariel Mas. And they were tasked with the creation of a new composition that will be based on the story of a refugee. So for this, we paired with interfaith ministries, and they were very kind, especially Elena Corbett served as a liaison, and when they all were paired with a refugee who in various interviews in person, they will share their stories with the composers, who in turn will write works inspired by those stories. We wanted to give this project a multidisciplinary dimension as well. So instead of only writing abstract music, we decided to give each composer a different challenge. So we had one of the pieces that will need to involve dance and choreography. The other one involved poetry, another one narration. There was a song, and there was a film. So there were all these different ways, very kaleidoscopic ways of presenting the stories that was really, really touching. All of this culminated at a concert on June 11th of 2019, White Oak Music Hall, a very intimate occasion, very, very, very intense, with the presence of many of the refugees who had been present. And everyone who was present can attest to the power of what we witnessed that night, because it was precisely what we were after. It was creating the awareness. It was connecting people who were living in Houston who would have otherwise never been in touch with each other. I mean, these composers living in their university campuses, and these refugees coming from such different backgrounds will probably have never met or crossed paths had it not been because of this program. So it is really integrating those refugees into the Houstonian community, what we were after, and also creating awareness among the audience of the Houston Symphony, who might not normally be exposed to this kind of stories as well, and this kind of music, new music, in fact.
Yes, no, it's such an incredible, incredible thing that came together. And like you said, I think it begins with the intimacy that's built between the student composers and those refugee families, and then growing into the expression, which is also so personal for everybody involved. I wonder if there's a story that stands out to you in the experience, across that project of that intimacy.
Well, I mean, each one was very, very special, of course, and some of them, we remember one of our collaborators, one of our refugees, did not want to make herself visible, but she had the courage to share her story. And she was a transgender person from El Salvador who had suffered, a lot of violence. And I think witnessing this project come to reality will have been too much for her. But the fact that she was generous enough to share her story, and through music, our composer Alejandro was able to tell her story, that was deeply, deeply touching to all of us. Someone who accompanied us that evening was Diana, who had fled Syria from violence, and the film actually depicted her, and she's such an upbeat person and so loving and you know, so thankful and so grateful. That's all that you learn, you know, the fact that she was this warmth, you know, this warm human being who had been through so many difficulties with her children, and yet here she was just bringing the best out of all of us. So really, it is absolutely transcended the music, and it went into the human stories of each. But you know, each story is irreplaceably unique, and I think that's what we wanted to definitely highlight.
Well, that project is such a gift to us in Houston, so we thank you for that, and we look forward to seeing one of the performances later on in this program. I am going to move us on to meet Sebastian. Again, Sebastian is the visionary and the founder behind the International Orchestra of Refugees, or IOR, and he focuses on generating sustainable opportunities for refugees and migrants to prosper. Before the IOR, Sebastian studied biochemistry and music at Loyola University of Chicago, with research studying congenital human disorders, as well as advanced directives and the power of attorney in outpatient clinics. And Sebastian's research thesis explored STEM and spectrum frequency analysis, which ultimately created a live multimedia light display for an orchestra. Sebastian frequently plays piano in various venues in Chicago and is currently a candidate for the master's degree in public policy at Harvard University for the class of 2021. Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you so much to you. Great to see a lot of the other panelists here. Special thanks to the Houston Public Library too. So yeah, I come to you just with the idea that music is critical to the human experience, with the musician being the keeper of the flame. So our objective with the IOR is to find ways to keep that flame alive and to keep it going. So again, my name is Sebastian, and I'm going to be part of today's entertainment. Some of the videos that you'll see today come from the IOR, featuring some of the musicians that we work with. The International Orchestra of Refugees is a nonprofit corporation I started in 2018, whose mission is to connect talented refugee musicians and other forcibly displaced musicians too, with meaningful opportunities to preserve their cultural heritage, find economic prosperity, and boost social integrations. We find refugee musicians locally and strive to connect them globally, be it to other musicians, customers, and sponsors in their new community. IOR not only searches for talent, but we find ways for it to grow, to be valued, and to be preserved, to keep that flame going.
Thanks so much. And it's such an incredible and I think visionary, really pioneering program, because you're really thinking about, you have a revenue model, right? That with the idea of continuing to support these musicians in a long-term way. Can you share a little bit more about that? Sure.
So before I speak a little bit to the revenue model, I'll kind of introduce how this started and how, you know, my dad at one point kind of gave up music because it wasn't sustainable in terms of producing a livelihood when he came to the States. I knew that both my parents emigrated to the United States from Europe. My mom from Poland, my dad from Romania. But after completing my degree in biochemistry at Loyola, I learned that my dad was once a refugee. When I was looking through my family's security box, looking for my social security card. And so discovering his refugee papers and understanding from him what his journey was like compelled me to start IOR. And IOR, we want it to be a mission that inspires and galvanizes persons to support this community of resilient and talented persons But we also want to find ways to sustainably and feasibly support them. One of the kind of pillars of what we want to do here is to support and foster economic prosperity for them. So there are a number of ways in which they can do so. The performance space is one. We've been trying to leverage some of the virtual performance spaces to support financially some of these musicians. That's also one means to boost social integration too. So we want to couple economic prosperity with boosting social integration as well. The second means of doing so is through an online music lesson platform, in which we hope to pilot soon, in which the musician, the refugee musician, is the teacher, teaching to either other refugees or members in their new community in which they now live. So that's another means of doing so. With another means, another channel that we like to explore too, that we are exploring now, is the licensing of the music that they've already produced. Licensing it to different media service providers, to different companies, and finding means for them to be supported that way too.
That's amazing. And you've gotten to know so many refugee musicians through this process. And are they across the United States? And are you like just sort of how, what's the community that you're working with?
So when we started the International Orchestra of Refugees, in the name IOR International, we were looking at musicians internationally. But then when the pandemic hit and kind of our scope of operations were significantly narrowed, we came to learn that there were a number of musicians here within the United States, including in Houston, in Texas. Little did I know that Texas has historically led the nation in resettling refugees. When I looked more into it, I saw headlines from the LA Times. I have it right here: how Houston has become the most diverse place in America. Or the Migration Policy Institute, a profile of immigrants in Houston, the nation's most diverse metropolitan area. It's a city of refugees, and it's been a joy to, when IOR introduced ourselves to Houston last summer, to no surprise, we were welcomed with open arms too. So we've been working with resettled refugees here in the United States. If a refugee or other person who's been forcibly displaced contacts us outside the United States, we of course won't hesitate to work with them. So the scope of our operations, if there's a forcibly displaced musician in need of a community, we're there.
That's wonderful, and we look forward to hearing more about the program and the work that you do. And I'm going to move us on to our final panelists. Last but definitely not least, Shawn Conley. Shawn Conley is a Hawaiian-born bassist and composer whose love for the diversity of sound has led to a career spanning many genres. He has been playing for 6 years with the SilkRoad Ensemble, which was founded by Yo-Yo Ma, and is a member of the Brooklyn-based chamber orchestra, The Knights. And recent projects include an upcoming release of the Brahms and Beethoven violin concertos with Gil Shahan and The Knights, and an international tour of a new performance art piece by South African visual artist William Kentridge. As a studio musician, he has performed on multiple soundtracks, including True Grit, Moonrise Kingdom, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, the Vietnam War documentary by Ken Burns and Lynn Novick, and the Amazon series, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And Shawn most recently is a recipient of the SilkRoad Ensemble's 2020 Seed Award for his project, The Refugee Songbook. And Shawn, we're so pleased and honored to have you with us today.
Thank you, Ellen. This is really great and super inspiring to hear everybody's story and get to meet everyone virtually. It's great. So thank you for having me.
Well, we would love to hear about the Refugee Songbook, how it came about, and what your plans are for the project.
Sure. So this songbook, the idea of a songbook came to me from being in the world that I'm in SilkRoad land, and the music circles that I'm in. I am around, get the great privilege to be around all these amazing musicians from all around the world and from places that are having refugee crises historically and currently. And I realized that even being surrounded by these people and these cultures and learning this music, I wanted to help and I didn't know how to help because I'm a bass player. You know, what I do is music, and I didn't know a way in to help. And I had basically the realization of there's got to be lots of people that might not even be at the privileged place that I am of having friends that are from these countries. They might not even know someone from this country. So where are they going to go to learn how to help? So what I wanted to do was try to, in some way, help create a toolkit for other like-minded musicians around the world to be able to do something to help. So the idea with the Refugee Songbook is to collect folk songs, folk music from countries that are experiencing a refugee crisis, and get composer friends, heroes, and mentors of mine that I've met along the way to arrange them for a set ensemble in more or less kind of like a Western classical music setting of new music or something that is translatable by Western classical musicians, because that was the other big thing of, if I'm a violinist in Fargo, North Dakota, how am I supposed to, learn Syrian folk music just off the fly without knowing anyone? So I wanted to find a way that people can have an in. So by commissioning composers through this grant to write pieces and arrange folk songs from these countries, what the goal would be is to let musicians around the country, around the world really, download these songs for free. Download the PDFs to be able to put together a program of their own to put on house concerts or benefit concerts, or seed a piece into a concert that's already there to raise awareness for refugee issues and also raise funds. So if you're going to put on a house concert, the goal then is that we can also suggest organizations that would be someone to give to, because likewise, I'm like, who do I give my money to? I want to help. How do I help? So I wanted to help in any way that I can with the friends that I have and the heroes that I have to put together a toolkit. So I'm sort of in the process of that. It's really inspiring to hear you all talk because I'm very much at the beginning of my journey with this. And it's great to see how much good there is being done out there and what can be done. So right now we're collecting songs, and I've commissioned 4 composers, and we're trying to grow it more so that as the world comes back offline, as it were, we can start actually having some of these house concerts. I'm really excited, being a Houstonian currently, of all learning about all of the amazing things in Houston. To be able to put on a concert here would be really exciting. Do some house concerts here. And like Jimmy was saying, actually, the other goal is to sort of harness this audience that would normally come to a classical music concert or be familiar with the music that we play, to expose them to a new culture. Because what I've always found for myself is that that's my in into other cultures, because I'm a musician, but it's through the culture, the culture basically breaks down any boundaries and shows people as humans and shows you like the immense value that each culture has that you can dive into, and makes it not just like a face on the news or a country on the map. It actually gives you real life human experience with the person. So that's sort of the quick answer and goal of the project.
It's amazing. But can you share an example, share a story of how that has happened in your collaborations, in the works that you've commissioned? You're working across language, probably across geographies. Can you just share one of those experiences?
Sure. Well, I know in this Refugee Songbook thing, since it's still so new, the thing that's been most fascinating to me is actually when talking to the composers. My original idea was this is going to be about Syria, because that was the original impetus for me, was hearing a good friend of mine, Kinan Azmeh, who's a fantastic clarinetist from Syria, who's also in SilkRoad, and just hearing his story a lot, and being around him and realizing how powerful it is. And I wanted to do whatever I could to help out with that. And so I proposed a project and started commissioning people, and realized right away that, of course, the refugee issue is huge, and it's not just Syria, obviously. And so it was like, oh, well, let's actually look at this issue as a larger scope. And each composer felt very passionately right away about something. So we have a composer writing about the border between Syria and Turkey, and folk songs that transitioned between those two countries. Composer writing about refugees from Iran from 20 years ago. And so for this specific project, I'm still kind of at the beginning of finding out these cross-cultural collaborations. In my own life, it's sort of ever present in my music that I get to be a part of, because so much of my job is going and learning a new piece of music, or a new cultural influenced piece of music, hopefully from someone from that world. And it is always incredibly illuminating, and almost never what I think it is. When someone teaches me a folk song, I'm a musician, I've been doing it for a really long time. It's what I love most, and I'm continually floored about how little I know when I learn someone else's music and culture, and how generous and giving they are with their time and their knowledge when they teach you a folk song or teach you music from their culture.
Well, I can relate to that. I also play violin, so I can relate to that experience of across boundaries, across language, and that it's a language that everybody can speak, and it just opens up so many worlds within your own life. And I am so inspired by everybody's stories that we've just begun to open up these worlds. And now we have the privilege to hear some of the music from our refugee community through the project mentioned by Sebastian by the International Orchestra of Refugees called the Refugee Anthem. Let's experience and watch together the universal power of music.
Салам, бихамид бинандиган.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Артем, и я родился и вырос в России, но сейчас живу в США.
معكم الفنان زبير العوادي. تحية الحب والسلام.
اسمي من آریان است. من از کردهای شمال سوریه هستم.
جئتكم من بلاد الحضارة والنهاية العراق الجريح.
و سرود پرندگان در سال 2016 نوشتم به درخواست از سازمان ملل.
أعيش في هيوستن تكساس منذ 10 أعوام. أعمل كمحترف عود منذ 22 عام. أتذوق فيها الحب والسلام. راجي أن يكون عزفي له صدى.
Я очень люблю гимн беженцев, потому что его натура, она передает то, через что проходят многие люди, которые бегут от войны, от преследования и многих других ужасных ситуаций, которых они пытаются избежать.
و آنها گفتن که من چون که من هم پناهنده بودم یه وقتی و هم موسیقی هستم که گفتن که بهترین کس هستم که من این سرود را بنویسم.
لكل محبي الموسيقى ومن يتذوق بسماعها.
و من سعی کردم که یک کمی از حال پناهندگان در این سرود بیان کنم.
Для меня быть музыкантом — это привилегия, потому что музыка — это международный язык, на котором не обязательно говорить, чтобы понимать его.
درباره اهمیت موسیقی در زندگی من حتما از کودکی با موسیقی وابسته بودم، اما در 14 سالگی من تصمیم گرفتم که موسیقی بشم و موسیقی همه زندگی من بشه.
Всю мою жизнь музыка не только была моим убежищем, но еще и путем узнать другие культуры и других людей получше.
و همه پیام‌هایی که دارم در ذهنم، چه در مورد موسیقی باشه، چه اجتماعی باشه، چه سیاسی باشه، که از راه موسیقی بیان کنم و به دنیا بگم.
Музыка, так же как и настоящая любовь, не имеет никаких границ, в том числе и политических.
الآن من سرود پرندگان برایتون میزنم.
It's absolutely beautiful. And thank you to the IOR again for the opportunity to experience that. And thank you to Artem and Ariane and Zubair for their beautiful performance. You know, after seeing and hearing from them, you know, we know that the conversation around refugees is constantly in evolution. And I wanted to start with Kimberly. Kim, if you could share a little bit about you know, your views on the context around refugees, and you know, what is the conversation, the range of conversation that you hear and you know, experience.
Yeah, the range is far reaching. I think over the last several years, there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of a desire to want to define, especially down here in Texas, in terms of sort of those individuals who are seeking safety and protection, whether they come across our southern border or they are coming from a camp in Nairobi or from South Sudan or from Lebanon or other locations. The way in which they get here and the reason why they're here are actually very similar, if not, you know, the same. It's though that the process by which, you know, our language and our conversation doesn't humanize them as just being individuals wanting to restart and find protection and safety and, you know, wanting their kids to grow up and go to school and being able to work and, you know, pay their bills and everything. I think there's a lot of wanting to find people as good or bad, or, you know, changing refugee with migrants, with aliens, with undocumented, and it all get mixed together, which I think confuses people and it loses sight of the human, right? The individual, the person. And, you know, it's really a lot of work on all of our parts. And what everybody's saying is to really bring this back to, this is a person, this is a life, this is a human. No matter where they come from or how they've gotten here, they're here. And now how do we step forward to help them reestablish? So the conversation has been quite diverse and challenging over the last several years, and been quite hard. And I am not one to want to either pin pro or con, positive or negative of how they're here, but these are all individuals who need help and who need support and who need you know, services to sort of navigate that new start to their lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to bring everybody together into this conversation because each of you has, you know, has really devoted your lives and your hearts to bringing, you know, bringing our communities into our lives, and bringing the refugee communities into our lives, and influencing that conversation and thinking very, you know, thinking about how to build an intimacy with these communities. Sebastian, I wanted, you know, I wonder if you could share just how you came to music. You know, you shared about your dad, but just the way that that music influences this conversation.
So there are many. For this community, there are many members of this community that come from different parts of the world, speaking different languages, practicing different faiths. But there's one thing that draws us all together, and that music is something that we all have in common. Everyone with a heartbeat has got some rhythm. Sometimes my heart, you know, skips a beat when I hear some of the music played by the musicians in the IOR, or if I were to see the love of my life. But music is something that we're all drawn to. Sport is another thing. Food is another thing. So it's great to leverage some of the commonalities that we all have. And Zubair, I just want to say he's a neighbor in the city of Houston that you should really get to know a little bit more about. in his video how he said, "I aspire for my playing to be an echo for all music lovers." So our job is to kind of give him the platform for him to share that music. And, you know, oftentimes that can be done through education, just getting to know more about Zubair, more about other persons like Zubair. So music and education is definitely kind of central to what we try to do here in this conversation.
Mhm. And I think each of us probably has observed where there may not be there may be a misunderstanding of you know, who these people are, and I wonder if one of you can share how you've overcome, you know, maybe just a misunderstanding, or you know, built a bridge across to people who may not even want to listen.
Well, I wanted to respond to that because I think you know, we were talking about the words empathy and awareness um, prior to the beginning of this meeting, and I think those are key because as an artist and as a composer, well, you can choose to use your platform to do something completely abstract, and that is perfectly valid as well. But you can also use your platform to feature something that you consider is urgent and important. And you know, when you use a platform to communicate stories that are important, you create empathy because we are not legislators. I mean, we are not necessarily appealing to people's reasoning. That is not my job. I'm appealing to people's emotions, and I'm trying to make them see refugees and people who are the victims of, you know, falling in the cracks of some system. They are not the other, you know, and as Kimberly said, they are people who just want to have normal lives. And another project that comes to mind is one that involved dreamers, which I created here in Berkeley, with, you know, in communion with the community of dreamers here at UC Berkeley, which is over 500 people actually. And that is an example of, you know, they're technically not referred to as refugees, but they do not enjoy the same rights as someone who has, you know, been born here, even though they might have had their entire lives built in this country. And those are the things that I have also seen. It is easy to pander, you know, to people's fears, and it is easy to objectify human beings, and that way we dehumanize them, and by doing that, it is easier to attack them and to use them as pawns, and in a way as tools to forward your own ideological, you know, pursuits. But honestly, that is all when you are not connected to the humanity, to the emotion, to the reality of people, you're able to do that. But if you allow yourself, and if you allow yourself in a concert hall to really be brought into this world, and to be immersed in that desire for unity that you see in some, you know, you see what Sebastian is doing with the International Orchestra of Refugees. You see the Eastern Western Divan Orchestra that unites Israelis and Palestinians. And you see how that power, you know, the commonalities that we have are stronger than the differences if we really want to make that effort.
Could I respond to that too? Yeah, so, you know, a line that kind of popped up in my head was oftentimes, you know, refugees can be looked upon as victims, but really, rather than victims, you know, I look at them as victors. And the same can be said with the Dreamer community. Kimberly noted that refugees, like out of the 70,000 that have been resettled in Houston, more often than not, they're faster and more efficient at being entrepreneurs than US-born persons. So these victors, or, you know, in the Hamilton production, what was the line? Like, immigrants, we get the job done. You know, dreamers, we get the job done. Refugees, we get the job done. Yeah, great to hear about the work that you're doing, Jimmy, and a tool like the one that Shawn's creating, you know, is something that I feel like a lot of persons that maybe have felt disconnected from this community is something that they can certainly leverage to better support and provide and you know show dignity and resilience to this community as well.
Shawn, did you want to share?
You know what I was thinking while y'all were talking, in terms of getting people connected to the community through cultures is great tabla player Sandeep Das. I hear talk about music in terms of traveling, right? Like we don't all get the opportunity to travel, especially in the last year. But even before that, we don't get the opportunity to travel to all these different countries and different cultures and through music and food. But our world music, you can really travel and you can feel completely immersed in the concert hall, in a culture, and in a music, and by connecting to it that way, then you just want to go deeper, just like going down a YouTube rabbit hole, right? You can just keep following the culture and keep following the connection to make it become more familiar, basically, and through familiarity comes, you know, collaboration and all kinds of great things. That's what I hope for.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, music just takes you into another world, both kind of spiritually, but also spiritually and emotionally, but also, yeah, in those relationships that you build as you're collaborating, you get to know just a whole world that you might not ever visit. Well, we have an opportunity to go into another world. We have the honor to have to view one of the performances of Resilient Sounds of Houston, which was led again by Jimmy. And so let's watch this together.
That's not why I left either. And it's not why you left either. We left for our lives, Adil, our freedom. We left to have a future.
We decided we wanted something that would be impactful but also linked to the city of Houston. And I went asking around what made Houstonians most proud. And the answer was always diversity. We decided to reach out to the University of Houston and Rice University so that we could get this group of students that we could mentor, 3 from each university. What we had in mind was creating a concert where we will be premiering 6 new works. But we wanted also those works to not be merely musical, but we also wanted them to be multidisciplinary. One works with a filmmaker, the other one works with a dancer, the other one works with a narrator, a singer, and so forth. So we have all this variety, and we have this framework.
It was awesome because I grew up listening to the Houston Symphony. I am born and raised in Houston. Being able to work with them is something I could never imagine. It's a dream come true.
But in addition to having a composer and an artistic partner, we added this other element, the human element. And that's when the issue of diversity and integration come forth. I wanted to reach out to immigrants in Houston and refugees specifically.
As a refugee, we really need to show the people about our story. And also, we want to show the people how we are very appreciate them because they open their arms to welcome us here.
This is a chance for us to find the common ground with other people that we may or may not have ever come across on a daily basis, but we can encounter them through these works of art and really find resonance and find our shared humanity.
My name is Salemu Alimasi. I'm from Democratic Republic of Congo. My story is kind of huge because it's a lifetime story. So it started when I was 6 years old, when the war broke up in my country. There we had to run to save our lives. Reaching somewhere called Makobola, at my young age, I saw a massacre, how they could kill people, and it was devastating.
Oh, it was absolutely heart-wrenching. I mean, I can't imagine going through anything even close to what he's been through. The most important part for me is to like convey the story to the audience in the way that he wants them to hear it, and sort of that shows a lot of respect for what he's been through and where he is now.
She sent me a piece of the music. Oh my goodness. I spent 30 minutes listening, listening again, listening to it. And I remember one of my colleagues, we sit in the big corridor, she said, "Whew, that music is taking me somewhere." I said, "Oh yeah, that's my story."
These are people who don't really like have an opportunity to speak their story very much, and it's really a way to help bring a community that people don't really realize is there, and bring them to the forefront and give them a really strong voice.
America is the place where I can pursue our dreams, and Houston is the place where we can build our futures. I am coming to Houston.
Well, again, Jimmy, thank you for leading that just incredible experience and just a gift to all of us. We're unfortunately, coming to the end of our time here, but we'd really like to hear from each of you about how we might, every single one of us can influence this conversation. Each of you came very organically into getting to know this community and having, developing just a passion and a commitment to this community, and making your community's home for these refugees. And I wonder if you could share about, how, if you were to tell your neighbor who has maybe never had the privilege to meet one of these, one of these refugees, what is a way that any one of us can begin to raise awareness, and kind of relating to our previous conversation, to sort of distinguish from what is rumor and myth, and pointing people to the truth, that these are humans, these are our neighbors, these are just wonderful people to build friendships and relationships with. Shawn, I wonder if we could start with you.
Sure. Well, personally, what I'm excited to do after this call is to kind of do more research about all of this, but dive into Kimberly, into your whole world, and see what I can do as a Houstonian to learn more about it from you, because you clearly know so much and have so much going on. So if somebody wanted to really dive in, I would point them your way. As myself right now, what I already do with folks that seems to be really successful is to share music, to actually, send links of music, to be like, "Have you heard this band? Oh my God, have you heard this artist? This is an amazing thing." Because through sharing music, especially as a musician, sharing it to somebody, some of my actual neighbors who are not musicians, they're going to be excited to listen to something, because it's hard to know what to listen to. And through listening to some music from other cultures, then that will get people just excited about the culture.
Kim?
I breed myself on the fact that I am blessed with a group of individuals who are artists beyond my recognition. And while I know topical some of the work around refugees, and I've been around it a long time, I think, really supporting opportunities for having gatherings, whether it be around music or food or education or awareness, really providing a space like the Houston Library is doing, of meeting and talking and just having a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and having a conversation, right? I think there is it's so easy to see pictures or to see some word across of a screen, and our filters and our world sort of block the opportunity to sort of have a meaningful engagement. And upon those meaningful engagements, that is what changes people's hearts and minds. And so, like, I was having goosebumps listening to the music, because that just makes me feel, right? And it opens my heart, which then makes me want to know more and learn more. And I think that music does that, conversation does that. And I really think that those are the opportunities that change our ether.
Completely agree. Just beginning with conversations. Sebastian?
Yeah, want to take an online music lesson with a refugee musician? That's one means of doing so. I say that throughout history, civilizations have been remembered through the arts. Refugees can continue to write that story. And I'm humbled and thrilled and electrified that Houston Public Libraries wants to be a part of that conversation, and any of the audience today too. If you are looking for ways to connect with IOR, the best I can say right now is we'd be happy to connect with you. And if you're interested in taking a music lesson, picking up an instrument you never even dream of picking up, like the oud, kind of a more unconventional instrument, then we'd be happy to talk.
Jimmy?
Well, yes, I mean, in a way, what I would like to do is an invitation to artists and viewers, to artists, creators, musicians of all walks of life who are watching this, to really explore the music of different cultures. I mean, I've been an immigrant all of my life. I've lived half of my life outside of Peru, my native country. I lived in Miami when I was 12 for a year, and then I moved to Finland for 7 years. I've lived in the United States for 14, lived in France for a year. So it's irreplaceable, the human contact, traveling, understanding other people. That is what makes you appreciate different cultures. That is what opens up your horizons. And as artists, I think it will only add to the wealth and the richness of your art if you explore different cultures and different kinds of making music. And to the viewers, I think whoever is watching this must already have a real interest in the issue of refugees. And I just want them to really dive deeper into it and use whatever craft, whatever profession they're into. I think there's always a way to find a way to help refugees, because there's not enough that can be done to help everyone who is being displaced around, and that humanitarian crisis is just growing with every passing year, and it's something we cannot ignore, and we cannot really see it as an issue that comes from the news. Really, we have to see that our neighbors are. Some of them are refugees, and I do know some of my neighbors are refugees. And so, if you really go out there and explore and understand their stories and listen to them, if you open up your ears and your minds, then that's already quite a lot, I think.
Well, this has been just such a rich, just beginning of a conversation. And we want to give the biggest thank you to each one of our panelists, Kim, Sebastian, Shawn, Jimmy, and all the people that you represent. We want to just echo everything that's been said. We encourage everybody to begin the conversations just with the people around you, and seek out those opportunities. Go look for somebody that you haven't yet met, or if you're in Houston, go look for Kim and Shawn. But also, we at the Houston Public Library are committed to these conversations, and we would love to hear from you if you would like to work together with one of us to host another such conversation as we've had today. So we're going to close out today's program with music. We have a performance or a music video from a refugee, Abraham Mwenda, who is a musician with the International Orchestra of Refugees. So again, thank you to the IOR for this. We leave you with this experience of emotion and universal language. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Hi everyone, my name is Abraham Winda. I'm a singer-songwriter, currently based in Los Angeles, California. I was born in Congo, I was raised in Kenya, and I lived in Kentucky for 5 years before I moved to California. A little bit about my story is I was born in Congo, like I said, and there was war. War broke out and my family was forced to flee for safety and refuge, so we ended up in Kenya. And then in the year 2013, we got a resettlement to come to the United States, and this has been my new home for the past 8 years now. I feel like music is such a crucial part of a community and a society because it's important for cultural exchange, amongst other incredible reasons like just having fun, entertainment. For me, music has helped me in incredible ways, but one of the way that has stood out for me, it's allowed me to express myself, it's allowed me to tell my story, and it's also allowed me to meet people that I would have never met if I wasn't doing music. And I just think that I'm blessed to be able to share my music with you guys.
They say east to west, home is best, but where is home? Is it the place that embraced me, the place that raised me, or the place where I was born? So where is home? Where is home? My whole life I had to answer the question, where are you from? You look kinda different and you kinda talk funny, you must be far from home. So where is home now? Na 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 na, where is home? Oh, 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 yeah. Home is where you can kick your feet up and relax in peace. It's got nothing to do with all the politics of how you look and speak. Home is where the love is real, no matter who you be. Home is where the heart is. Ba-da-da-dum, chipam, ba-da-da-dum, chipam, ba-da-dum. They say east to west, home is best, but where is home now? How can it be my parents' country of origin when all my life this foreign land is all I've known? So where is home? Where is home? Yeah, my whole life I've had to answer the question, where do you belong? Yeah, you look like this and you talk like that. Hey, you got us guessing wrong. So where is home now? Na 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 na, where is home? Oh, 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 yeah. Home is where you can kick your feet up and relax in peace. It's got nothing to do with all the politics of how you look and speak. Home is where the love is real, no matter who you be. Home is where the hurt is. Ba-da-da-dum, chipam, ba-da-da-dum, chipam, ba-da-dum. So you can catch me, Central Kentucky, sipping on some chai tea latte. You can catch me, Los Angeles, dollar and a dream in my pocket. Catch me in Nairobi, cruising in a tattoo. Catch me in Kinshasa, eating fufu na pondu. You can catch me, Central Kentucky, sipping on some chai tea latte. You can catch me, Los Angeles, dollar and a dream in my pocket. Catch me in Nairobi, cruising in a tattoo. Catch me in Kinshasa, eating fufu